All right, welcome everyone. We are continuing with our Rocky Mountain Reach Commercialization Basics series. And today my guest is Dr. Sarj Patel, or Sarj, president of Fire Diagnostics and a seasoned researcher with over 30 years of experience in neuropharmacology, molecular and cellular biology, and biochemical assay development. Inspired to explore the potential transformation of his research into cutting-edge innovative technologies to revolutionize the way we diagnose and monitor neurodegenerative disorders such as glioblastoma, ALS, addiction, concussion, and traumatic brain injury. In 2016, Sarj co-founded Fire Diagnostics, leveraging his experience to establish and grow the company. Sarj holds a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Montana and a master's degree in neuroscience from the Institute of Psychiatry, KCL. He completed a postdoctoral training in the Department of Neurology at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and serves as an adjunct faculty member at the University of Montana. Welcome, Dr. Patel.
Thank you, Karen. Pleasure to be here.
Well, I gave a little bit of this information in your intro, but I'd love to just dive in a little with you and understand more about what motivated you to pursue your research commercialization.
A couple of things, actually. The work that when I was on faculty at UM, my collaborator, Dr. Thomas Rao, and I, basically, we were new faculty and we had to come up with an idea for projects that we could acquire funding for our labs. And one of the interests I've had for a really long time was neuroscience. And, with my background in neurodegenerative disorders like glioblastoma and especially ALS at Johns Hopkins, I was really interested in trying to see if we could take some of the knowledge that I'd acquired at Hopkins about how you can make an impact on a disease that could very rapidly help the patients afflicted with the disease. It was one of the key moments I think I realized that when I wanted to, whatever I did for my own lab or for my own research projects, I wanted to make sure that I could move them very quickly, or at least try to help the patient population that we were working with. And in the case of my research at the University of Montana, we were working with concussion and traumatic brain injury, and the two groups of folks that we were working with primarily were athletes and veterans. And they're highly impacted by TBI and concussive injuries. And so the work that Tom and I were doing, we were hoping that we could, move along a path that could make an impact in those folks' lives. And the work we did was to basically identify molecules that were derived from the brain that we could actually pick up in the blood. And at that time, we were looking at these fairly new molecules called microRNAs that had the ability to leave the organ of origin, so in this case, the brain, following injury, and we could detect them in the blood. And so Tom devised an animal model to do that, and then we were very fortunate to work with both athletes and veterans to basically see, was our harebrained idea, did it have any legs? And luckily for us, it did. And so, that started our research programs, our independent research programs at UM. And very quickly, we realized that there was potential for that research to have some kind of commercialization potential.
Yeah, we're hearing that quite a bit, that's kind of the leap that people take once they see the difference in terms of really being able to be part of getting that to patients, getting their research to patients. What would you say, like when you had that realization or had that moment where you were committed to moving towards commercialization, what were the first steps that you took?
Well, one of the first things I did was talk to a mentor and collaborator, Dr. Charles Thompson, Chuck Thompson at the university. He was one of my PhD advisors back in the day when I was doing my graduate work at UM. And, he'd had experience in doing that. And he was always very encouraging of that kind of sort of potential and possibility for folks doing research at the university, that there is a way. And he'd had some success doing that. And so, speaking with him, Dr. David Paulson was another professor who was sort of involved in that kind of work. He worked with the military and the DoD to take some of his work that way. And Tom closely collaborated with David. And so we had, we did have some folks that were able to at least help us game plan how this could potentially happen.
Yeah. Let's steal some of like their 10,000 hours and your 10,000 hours. Like what advice did they give you in those moments?
Well, the number one thing, obviously, whenever we're doing anything that's novel, research-based, and an academic setting, is intellectual property. And, it's all very new to me. Tom had a little experience in it, but basically, planning that out and knowing how we were going to protect the idea. Obviously the university had some capability to help with that sort of aspect, folks in main hall. And so just game planning that, finding an IP attorney and all of those kinds of things. And then also, at that time we hadn't considered starting a company quite yet. And a few factors actually pushed us in that direction. But yeah, the number one thing, protect your IP, because without that core idea protected, there's nothing really to move forward. And so I think that for us initially, that was the biggest thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Talking a little bit more about IP, what was the structure that you set up with the university, I presume, to get that protected? Did you immediately end up licensing it out, or?
No, so I mean, obviously we had to file the patent, and we at that time used Zachary Scott, who I believe now at the university, but we found the attorney, and then we worked with folks in main hall to prepare that and get that filed, and so Tom and I were obviously authors, and obviously the work that we did was on campus, and so university has rights to that too. And so, we worked within that framework to get that set up. And, that takes time. There's revisions, and luckily we were granted the patent on our, basically detection of traumatic brain injury and tracking concussion patent for these microRNAs. Long story short, eventually the university did license it to another company to develop, with Tom and I's blessing, to move that forward. And, and so that company is continuing to work on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to give researchers who are thinking about this kind of a sense of what that timeline looks like and the decisions that are made.
Yeah. So, I mean, while it's specifically on the patent part, that you file a provisional, so that gives you basically a date stamp of this is your unique idea, and then you've got a year to convert that and put that in, and then it can take a year to several years, depending on how many back and forth conversations you have with the USPTO examiner. They will examine it to see if, one, has anyone thought of this idea before? Is it truly novel? Is there any other prior art, which is the term they use to show, to see if the novelty of your idea, if it infringes on anybody else's patents, all of those things This is why having a good patent attorney is extremely important for this process. And so, yeah, for us, it wasn't so bumpy. There was some give and take with the USPTO. There were some other patents out there, but we were able to tailor our patent to uniquely focus on our novel technology and get that passed through the and granted by the patent office. So it can take, I mean, it's little as 2 years, maybe more, 3 or 4, depending on the extent and the claims. So, patents dependent on all the claims that you're making. We were claiming these things could be used for detecting concussion or traumatic brain injury, tracking, all those kinds of things. And then those individual molecules, how they related. And, whenever you're looking at something in biology, that's in nature, it's almost impossible now to patent that because it's part of nature, So it's more the kinds of patents that we developed were sort of more use patents. So we have these molecules, but we're using them for a particular purpose, and it was that we were covering. And that's a patent strategy thing that you have to have a really deep conversation with a patent attorney to understand the best way to protect your idea.
Yeah, so at this point, you have spoken with your mentors, you have good advisors behind you, you do the foundational piece of commercialization and tech transfer. What were the next or some of the additional challenges that you were facing at this stage of bringing your research out into the market?
Funding, number one thing, money, investment. And at this time, again, Tom and I, this is prior to founding FIRE. We were very fortunate. Timing is everything, as they say, and there's a little bit of serendipity in that. We just happened to be working on a topic, concussion and traumatic brain injury, at a time it was exploding in the media here in the United States. So, there was a lens focused on the NFL, obviously was a big part of this. And then also just, injuries to college athletes, to high school students, and the impact that was actually having in our state. And so we were very fortunate. These were sort of spread out over time. The initial money that we used to push this project forward was actually through an award from GE and the NFL. They put together a program called the Head Health Challenge, where they were challenging researchers to come up with novel ideas to help tackle issues related to concussion and traumatic brain injury. Both, immediately like new technology for head protection, all those kinds of things, to developing, at the other end of the spectrum, developing potential tests to detect and track and monitor the long-term outcomes to better understand what is happening in these diseases. And, it was while we were working, obviously that was very athlete focused. We were using, at the same time, trying to see how we could help the veterans with those kinds of things. And, there's a whole mix of different things there. With the athletes, it's sort of more acute injuries initially that become progressive. Whereas in the case of veterans, it's things that they may have had for a while. And so we tried to utilize that base to see what opportunities we had for funding to bring in. So the GE NFL, we were fortunate to get 2 awards from them to do the initial blood work and really generate that up, because they were very interested in supporting researchers that were trying to impact the field. We were one of 16 in the whole world to get that award, so it was pretty prestigious for UM. And then the next round of money that really founded the company. So I can say that, and that actually came from support from an initiative that the Montana State Legislature put together called it's called the M-Ready program. It was the Montana Research and Economic development initiative. And it was basically a way that the legislature tasked the Montana university system to encourage, there's a huge knowledge base and some incredible research done at all the campuses across Montana, whether they're associated with MSU or University of Montana. And this, basically pushed this out to the VPs of research at both institutions to say, hey, what cool ideas are out there? And they range a whole bunch of different things, drones, agriculture, things that the universities are focused on. And luckily for us, with the biomedical research that happens at one of the things that they were very interested in supporting were, projects that could have that kind of impact. And Tom and I put together a proposal with Chuck Leonard and Alex Santos from PT to help develop the Neural Injury Center at And part of that was a group of researchers developing projects, and one of them being our blood-based biomarker project for TBI and concussion. And so working with the state on that's when we spun off FIRE as a company for RT. And so that in 2016, that's when we founded FIRE with support, support from GE and the NFL. And that part of our project, actually, we spun off, I think, 5 different companies. So the different researchers, because we brought together a collective of researchers doing all kinds of different things. PT doing the balance board, we were doing ocular motor tracking, because all these things are impacted in traumatic brain injury. We were trying to bring them all together, these novel 5 technologies, to see, can we put together a group of, like a suite of tests that can give us more information about exactly what's happening to individuals suffering from these injuries, both acutely right after and then, over time.
Yeah. So at this point, you're still kind of in the academy, or fully in the academy, and you're still writing grants. And I think, a number of our researchers who are used to writing NIH grants and kind of taking a different approach to their research rather than product development kind of need a little bit more support when it comes to putting our reach grants together, which we built boot camps around. But I'd wonder what you would say in terms of that phase where you were applying to these grants from the NFL and MReady. Did you see a difference in the way that you approached the grant writing?
Yeah, just to your point about NIH grants, the NIH and the Small Business Administration do have the SBIR and STTR program, which, they saw an opportunity there that, all this research that scientists are doing across every field has potential for impacting human health, especially from, the NIH. And so they partnered with the SBA to put this program together to specifically do that, to transfer technology out of universities and help academics push that forward. And it is a different kind of writing, right? Because you're expected to, what problem are you tackling very specifically? What product are you about to, what are you going to do? How are you going to commercialize it? Where's the market? All the things I had no idea about when I first stepped. Lifelong academics, me and Tom both at that time. And so it was a steep learning curve to do that. And luckily, again, we had mentors that who've done this, a lot of information online, infinitely more now too. So if anyone's even considering it, I would definitely reach out. SBIR.gov, all those sites have a lot of information. Those were that's basically what I changed. Instead of writing just regular or research related grants, we moved to more of a technology transfer based funding opportunities. And all federal agencies offer it. And so obviously we were very focused on NIH because of the kinds of things that we were doing. And so transitioning from writing just regular research grants to that was a steep learning curve. And but there are lots of people out there, lots of groups out there that will help you. We actually have one here on campus I wasn't aware of until very recently. That's part of that whole network. MSU has, I think it's the MTIP program that helps and I'm sure your folks are aware of that. So those are the kinds of things that we did initially. And then obviously one of the big parts of a private company, the kind of company we had, looking for investment, private investment, venture capital companies. And we were very fortunate at the time when we were just starting out. Got to talk to some local investors here in the state of Montana and get some initial investment to get us going. Away from campus.
I think that in some ways in smaller areas, more rural areas, you kind of end up taking what you can get in some, if that's fair. But I'd love to hear more about what your thoughts were going into raising capital. Did you, from a founder's point of view, were you looking at what were the key priorities when you were kind of setting that up and taking on those initial investments?
The initial investment was, again, this is my first foray into any kind of business environment. And then, that's different. There's the science side, which, obviously very comfortable doing. And then there's the business side, which, again, another very steep learning curve. I think for both Tom and I, Tom had a little bit of experience in it prior, but for me, it was all new. And so that was tough. We had to expand our team. We had to bring in some people. And luckily for me, the folks that we brought in were who had some experience. I brought in somebody with a little more business experience who had talked to investors in the past and stuff like that. And that was the first step that we sort of utilized. And they did, David Booth, he's my operating officer here at Fire currently. He was the one that introduced us to some investors that we've talked to. I think they were excited with what we were trying to do. They were very interested. We went after, we were lucky. We found a group of investors that wanted to invest in Montana. They saw a lot of potential within the state. And I think we were a little bit outside of their wheelhouse in terms of, they were very much more about technology, digital, stuff like that. And so to hear about this English dude talking about blood-based biomarkers and how we could hope to impact, healthcare was probably a little intriguing. But I think they saw the potential. And so that was one of the things we did. We looked locally first. We didn't go out to find investors who probably wouldn't have had an understanding of where we were coming from. The ecosystem we had here. And that, and you bring up ecosystem. There wasn't much of an ecosystem when Tom and I were doing this initially, but it has dramatically improved in the 8 years we've been sort of at this, which is great to see. And I do see a lot more companies springing up and stuff like that, but it's still tough. And then you throw things like the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, and the recovery of the economy post-pandemic has been tough on everyone, right? And so there are ups and downs to that, and markets change and things like that. And so it's just you've got to ride a bit of a wave. But if you're starting out here in Montana, there are lots of people who are interested in supporting companies originating in the state.
I think that's one of the most beautiful parts about growing a company here. It's just the people that are rooting for you, the people who are ready to dive in, and
people who are hesitant but I mean, honestly, when Tom and I first did this, people were like, "You're crazy doing this here." No
Mhm.
one's done this before.
Right. Yeah, you have to be a trailblazer, right? I think that's part
Sure,
of your
I wouldn't say I'm a
personality. Yeah.
trailblazer, but we're pretty good about going against the grain. So
Yeah. So, Sarge, I think a lot of different pathways are open to academic researchers, and yours is a unique one, but how would you say commercializing your research ended up impacting your career in in the academy?
well, in the academic setting, it definitely impacted it because, initially we were sort of splitting time a little bit, but it becomes all encompassing. If you
Mhm.
want it to be a success, in my mind, and in our particular situation, there was only the two of us initially,
Mhm.
and so and our appointments at the university were fairly unique to the research track faculty. So stepping away wasn't as difficult as it would if, let's say, if we were tenured faculty or anything like that. But yeah, no, this became 100% of my time, 100% of my effort. And so things I loved about the academic setting, lecturing, interacting with students and stuff like that, unfortunately took a hit. I'm really lucky though with the proximity that fire has to the university, and all the colleagues and friends I still have over there. I'm still able to go over and lecture every now and again. I do talk to biology students uh, about opportunities outside
Mhm.
of academia, kind of things. Um, so it's good, but yeah, no, fire is pretty much my career now. But it's a transition I was nervous about. There was no guarantees. When you do a venture like
Mhm.
this, there's very little security when you step out. And the fact that we've been able to keep the company afloat, moving forward, since 2018 when I stepped away from my position at the university, it's sort of confirms I made the right move, or I know what I'm doing
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will hear that and be like, "Oh no, I need to find a different pathway and be able to split my time a little bit more." And maybe that's bringing on other team members or anything. But a lot of
And that
people are
people
going to
do
hear
that.
that. Yeah, a lot of people are going to hear that and be like, "Wow, that is what I want. That's success to me to be able to step out and really have a true spin out company that is
Oh, I got to
successful."
thank my
So
wife. She's like, it's a leap of faith. Just do it. And
just do
so,
it. I
yeah.
like that.
So,
Yeah, thanks for Sarah. Um, my final question for you, because I know we're running out of time,
mhm.
is what advice would you give to other researchers interested in commercializing their discoveries?
Wow. You've got to have passion for whatever you're doing. I
Mhm.
mean, that was the driving force for me. I can't speak for Tom, even though I think we had a similar path. Um, I really felt like the science we were doing was important and could have an impact. You've got to believe that, and you've got to really
Mhm.
know your idea too. I mean,
Mhm.
you do lots of science happens. You've got to have a keen focus on how will this impact how things are done now, and how will it change it? How will it make it better? And obviously,
Mhm.
I'm talking from sort of more of a biomedical background. There's
Mhm.
I know there's tons of departments on campus that do all kinds of great science. It's finding the focus as well. Like,
Mhm.
you in science, we can go in lots of different directions all the time. A new result comes out and it's like, oh, this is cool. This is, and then you get focused on that. New things are going to be coming out all the time. But when you set yourself on a path to try and bring something to market ostensibly is what you're trying to do. Um, you have to see it through. You have to have the focus to follow through. And there will be changes, I mean, as you're developing a technology, you improve it. And this, you're also bound by whatever your patent is protecting it, those kinds of things. There's lots of factors. But primarily, you've got to have enthusiasm, perseverance, all common things that impact everyone. But when you're running it, when you're trying to make that jump, I think you've got to have sort of a clearer idea of exactly how you see your technology impacting and changing the world.
And I think a lot of academic researchers have that, right?
Yeah.
You
wouldn't do the
do,
science
they
that you're
just,
doing, but it's
yeah.
that taking that step away from academia to take it out. No, I mean, like I said, we took it on ourselves to do that. You mentioned that some people bring in partners, or you find somebody else who's already got experience in doing that and partner with them and do that. And then that way you can maintain your academic affiliation too. It just depends on how you want to do it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sarj.
You're welcome.
Everybody, Dr. Patel.
Thank you.